Welcome to Deep Dive. This is where you bring us the sources and we dive right in to pull out the most important insights for you.
And today, we've got something quite unique. It's a transcript excerpt from one of you, detailing a really surprising and deeply personal faith journey.
Absolutely. It's fascinating because it starts with this young guy, just 14, asking some really tough questions about the Bible.
Uh-huh.
And it ends up leading him somewhere completely unexpected, a maximum security prison where he finds something profound.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical conversion story, the winding road, Starts with questions, goes through disillusionment, some really hard times, incarceration.
Right. And then this unexpected spiritual discovery happens. It's quite the narrative.
So let's unpack it. Where does it begin?
Okay, so the narrator tells us he was really involved in his Christian community growing up.
Right, he mentions Wednesday Bible study, Friday youth nights, church every Sunday. He was fully in it.
Definitely not on the sidelines. He's active. But then, age 14, Wednesday Bible study. Something clicks. Or maybe unclicks for him.
He's reading the Bible, and he finds things that seem like contradictions. One verse saying one thing, another verse seeming to say the opposite.
And he does what you'd hope a curious kid would do, right? He raises his hand, asks the youth teacher, hey, what's up with this?
And the teacher's response is, well, it's really key to the whole story that follows.
Yeah. He says the teacher admitted he didn't even know those verses were there.
Wow.
And when pressed on how to reconcile them, the only advice was, basically, you just gotta have faith.
Oof. Yeah, you can see how that would land with a teenager asking genuine questions.
Exactly. For the narrator, that just wasn't an answer. He says he felt like he checked out spiritually in that moment. If understanding didn't matter, if it was just blind faith, well, why bother reading it? He felt like the foundation just crumbled.
And that's the start of what he calls a deep spiritual void. He felt like there's nothing here, it's gone.
Yeah, even if he kept going to church physically, mentally, spiritually, he was out.
And naturally, his focus shifted. He poured himself into, regular teenage life.
Football, surfing, girls, high school stuff. But he mentions feeling adrift, like he lost his moral compass.
Right. And that leads him to drift towards, as he puts it, the wrong crowd. Starts smoking weed, drinking.
He feels lost, basically. No direction.
So he tries to find some structure. He joins the military.
And he says he learned a lot there. Responsibility, accountability, how to be a man.
And this is crucial, he explicitly says it did nothing for his spirituality. That void, still there.
So after the military, he falls back into the old patterns. Wrong crowd, drinking, weed.
And he says he felt even worse this time. More careless, with relationships, jobs, just adrift.
This leads to something really shocking. He commits an armed robbery.
And the reason he gives is chilling. Not for money. He says it was for the thrill. He was bored, didn't care anymore.
What's wild is he had no prior record. No arrests, no jail time. This was it.
And this one act sends him straight to the deep end. Maximum security. Walla Walla State Penitentiary. WSP.
Yeah, he describes the shock. Suddenly he's in the big house with, everyone. Killers, thieves, dealers, gang members.
White supremacists, Mexican mafia.
Yeah.
He says everything was in there. It's a whole different world.
And he paints a picture of just how harsh it is. Constant tension, aggression, mentally, emotionally draining.
You have to be on guard constantly, even in your own cell. There's no real safety.
And a huge part of this environment was the rigid racial segregation. He talks about the rules.
Yeah, you eat with your race, you go to the yard with your race, white with white, black with black, Hispanic with Hispanic, period.
He makes it clear he never bought into that, though. He didn't come from that world, had no connection to, white supremacist groups.
So initially, he just tries to navigate it solo, kind of a Sigma male approach, he says, just asserting himself enough to survive without joining a faction.
Okay, so picture this. He's in this super tense, segregated place, just trying to get by. He's out running on the track one day, and he sees this Turkish man, Omar, with a group of 5 black men. And they start walking straight towards him, cutting across the yard.
Given the context he just described,
Yeah,
you'd brace for impact. He thinks, oh, here we go, expecting trouble.
But Omar completely flips the script.
Yeah.
He immediately diffuses it, says something like, no, we didn't come for that.
He actually apologizes for how it looked, given the prison politics,
Yeah.
and just asks if they can talk for 10 minutes.
It's pretty remarkable, right? Crossing those racial lines, de-escalating. It's not the expected move in WSP.
Not at all. So Omar starts the conversation. He asks the narrator, What do you know about Islam?
And our narrator, coming from his self-described, sheltered, white Christian type of world, is just honest. Absolutely nothing.
And this is where Omar's approach is really interesting. He doesn't jump into scripture right away.
No, he connects it to things the narrator already finds amazing, like nature, the universe.
Exactly. He talks about the expanding universe, how the sun and moon are at just the right distances for perfect eclipses, things like that.
And he links these wonders to God, to Allah's creation, and the narrator's hooked. He says he thought, wow, that's deep.
That connection opens the door. They start having these conversations regularly, walking the track, talking about Islam for weeks.
As Omar's explanations start making sense, the narrator describes this internal struggle. He feels this whisper from the Shaitan, the devil, basically.
Right, telling him to doubt, to stand up for Christianity. He tries to find flaws in Omar's points, to poke some holes.
But he can't. He says Omar was really knowledgeable, able to counter his arguments using proof from both the Bible and the Quran.
That's impressive. Shows a real depth of understanding.
Definitely. So after weeks of this, Omar gives him a gift, a Quran.
And he tells him, take care of this.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone else touch it. This is for you. That personal trust seems important.
So the narrator takes it back to his cell, and the first thing he does is look up names he recognizes from the Bible. Jesus, Moses, Abraham, Mary, Job.
And what does he find?
He's struck because the stories are, in his words, all the same. The core narratives are familiar.
But that familiarity also brings back that old skepticism, doesn't it? From when he was 14.
Totally. He remembers the Bible contradictions and thinks, oh man, if this is like the Bible, it's going to have contradictory verses too. He's bracing for it.
But Omar had apparently already talked about how the Quran was preserved differently.
Yeah, Omar explained it was revealed in Arabic, kept in that original language, and crucially, memorized word for word by millions throughout history.
That idea of preservation through mass memorization, generation after generation,
Yeah.
that really impressed the narrator.
It did, and he started reading it a lot. He says he was really taken by the Quran, reading it every day after breakfast.
He mentions one chapter specifically, doesn't he? Surah Ar-Rahman.
Yes, the most merciful. He said that one really touched him, that his heart most loved it. It's known for its, poetic descriptions of God's blessings.
And his cellmate notices him reading it all the time.
Yeah, and the cellmate's reaction kind of echoes that internal conflict again. He's surprised, tells him the Quran is for them, not us.
More whispers from the Cheyenne, as the narrator sees it, trying to build walls.
Right. So this goes on for about 3 months, the talks, the reading. Then Omar invites him to Jumu'ah.
The Friday congregational prayer. Omar describes it simply as kind of like Sunday church, just to give him a familiar reference point.
And despite all the internal wrestling, being a white American guy, considering Islam in 1991, knowing the stereotypes about terrorism and all that.
Which were definitely prevalent then.
For sure. But despite that battle between the stereotypes and the reality Omar was showing him, he really wanted to go. He was already very impressed with Islam.
He wanted the experience, so he attends Jumu'ah just as an observer. What stands out to him?
Several things hit him hard. First, hearing the adhan, the call to prayer, he just says it really hit him.
Then he sees the men doing wudu, the ritual washing before prayer.
And that impresses him deeply. This act of physically cleansing yourself before worship, he contrasts it with just, casually walking into church.
It signifies a different level of preparation, of intention.
Exactly. Inside, he learns the structure. The imam gives a sermon, the khutbah, then leads the prayer, the salah.
And then something happens that has a huge impact, both intellectually and spiritually.
Yeah, watching the imam, he recites the entire Quran.
The entire thing, from memory.
From memory, cover to cover, word for word without a mistake, during the sermon and prayer. Omar explained this tradition of memorization hips, how millions do it.
And how others listening will gently correct even tiny errors.
Right.
As a way to preserve it perfectly.
Right. And the narrator is just blown away by that level of devotion to the text. He compares it to what he knew from his Christian background and finds it incredibly impressive.
He also watches the other men praying. These are hardened prisoners, remember?
Yeah, solid savages in the prison yard. But during prayer, he sees them become visibly humble in front of Allah. That transformation is powerful.
So Omar, who told him he could just sit off to the side being a non-Muslim.
But he didn't want that. He wanted the whole experience. So he gets up, walks to the very front row to watch closely.
And what does he see there up close?
He notices their focus, intense, like nothing else matters right now. And he's struck by the beauty of the imam's recitation, the tilawah.
But then comes the moment, the absolute turning point for him.
Yes. It's when all the men go down together in sujud, prostration, putting their faces right on the ground.
In adoration of their Lord Allah, as he puts it.
Seeing that collective act of utter humility, of submission in that place by those men, he says his jaw just dropped.
You can almost feel the power of that image.
He felt his heart completely just opened to the guidance of Allah. The feeling, he said, became irresistible.
Wow. So the decision wasn't even a conscious deliberation at that point.
No, it was instantaneous. Right after seeing the sujud, he knew, Islam has now become irresistible to me. He had to embrace it.
So after the prayer finishes, Omar comes over, asks him what he thought.
And the narrator addresses that internal battle head on. He says, I know I'm white, but I have to be a Muslim. I gotta be a Muslim whether anybody accepts me or not.
Powerful. And how did Omar and the others react?
Incredibly positively, welcoming. He mentions hearing Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, Mashallah, Alhamdulillah, expressions of joy, praise, acceptance.
So right there, that day, in prison.
Yep, October 1991. Sitting in a circle with those men in a maximum security prison, he pronounced the Shahada, the declaration of faith. He became Muslim.
And looking back, how does he frame that experience, going to prison?
He says, going to prison to receive Islam was the best thing that ever happened in my life.
What an absolutely extraordinary story this listener shared. Truly.
Yeah.
From those first questions as a kid, that spiritual void setting in.
Yeah, through all the drifting, the bad choices, ending up in the absolute worst place imaginable.
And finding purpose, connection, and this deep faith there in maximum security. It's incredible.
It really highlights, doesn't it, how that emptiness he felt from age 14 just lingered until this completely unexpected series of events, meeting Omar, that connection across prison barriers.
The intellectual engagement, wrestling with the Bible, the Quran.
And then that final overwhelming emotional and spiritual impact of seeing the prayer, especially the sujud, that collective surrender.
It really does make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how sometimes, maybe it's when everything else is stripped away, when you're in the toughest circumstances.
That paradoxically, you might be most open to something profound, some kind of awakening.
Yeah. And it speaks volumes about seeking answers, being open to finding them in places you'd never, ever expect.
From people you'd never expect, it suggests that sometimes that search, that path, it might lead you through some real darkness, but towards an unexpected light. Makes you wonder where else those unexpected paths might lead if you're open to looking.